In this video, we're going to take a look at a red ink by KWZ Grapefruit. Now, as always, there's timestamps down below so you can skip around, but if you've got the time, I'd appreciate you checking out the entire video. Also down in the description is a link to the red ink playlist, so if you wanted to see more, you could find that there. I'm an ink guy, and let's get into the first writing sample done on 90 GSM Clairfontaine. No bleeding, no ghosting. We get no feather, spread, halo sheen. We do get a few shade spots that are occurring in the extra fine, which is quite a bit lighter than the stub, but not so much with the medium. The medium's darker than the extra fine, but lighter than the stub. The extra fine took 14 seconds to dry, while the medium took 19. Scrubby for both gave no color variation, although we do get some darker spots in the extra fine. The smear test says you could probably recover if you smeared while you were writing. To have a range of experience with this ink, all of the writing samples are done with a Jinhao 159 with a 1.1 stub, a Jinhao X450 with a medium, and a Jinhao X750 with an extra fine. Then a Lamy Safari with a 1.5 stub was inked up, used for a day, and used to take the notes for this video. The next writing sample is done on 52 GSM Tomoe River. We have no bleeding, but we do have quite a bit of ghosting. We have no feather, spread, halo sheen, no shade. The extra fine is quite a bit lighter than the stub, and the medium's only a little bit lighter than the stub. Extra fine took 20 seconds to dry, while the medium took 28. The scrubby for both gives us no color variation. We're not getting it in the writing. And the smear test, I do not think you could recover if you smeared while you were writing. I agree with Vita. There's a lot to learn by doing multiple chromatographies. The one on the left is done the way it's supposed to be done. A line of ink is put down, and then it's put into water for 10 to 15 seconds. And on the bottom of the chromatography, up at where the ink is, you see the hint of an orange, and then a bright red across the top. Now, the one on the right was let dry for 10 minutes before it was dunked in the water. And the only noticeable difference is that it didn't travel as far, but I'm not expecting any real resistance for this ink. The next writing sample is done on 80 GSM Rhodia dot pad. No bleeding, no ghosting. We get no feather, spread, halo sheen. A little bit of shading does show itself in the extra fine in that we get a few darker words. The medium is about the same tone as the stub, while the extra fine is quite a bit lighter. The extra fine took 14 seconds to dry, and the medium took 20. The scrubby for both give us no color variation, although we do see it in the extra fine. And the smear test, I'm not sure you could recover this if you smeared while you were writing. Resistance tests are done to see how this ink could be expected to perform on the page, and more importantly, how hard it may be to clean from your pen. The smear is allowed to dry for 3 days before testing it. Looking at the highlighter, it handled itself much better than I expected having seen the chromatography. I do feel confident using this in a note-taking situation if I needed to go back and highlight. Water shows why I wasn't really expecting such good results. Water is completely reactivating and removing it from the page, which is the reason that it only took water to get it out of my pen. Pen flush does everything that water did and nothing more, and the 1/3 bleach solution, as you would expect, completely destroys it. The next writing sample is done on life paper. No bleeding, no ghosting. We get no feather, spread, halo sheen, no shade. The tone of the paper makes any amount of its shading gone. The extra fine is quite a bit lighter than the stub, while the medium's the same tone as the stub. The extra fine took 9 seconds to dry, and the medium took 14. The scrubby for both show no color variation. We're not getting it in the writing. And the smear test, you could not recover if you smeared while you were writing. For the inks tested, the average viscosity is 2.5, and the realm of normal is 2.1 to 2.9. KWZ's Grapefruit has a viscosity of 2.31, so it's normal. If you're interested in how the viscosity test's done, then there's a link to that video down in the description. Now, let's take a look at Apica CD paper. No bleeding, a very minor ghosting that's there. We have no feather, spread, halo sheen, but we do get some spots of shading that do show up in the form of some darker words with the extra fine. Now the extra fine's a lot lighter than the stub, and the medium's the same tone as the stub. Extra fine took 6 seconds to dry, while the medium took 10 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both give us no color variation, although in the extra fine writing we do get those darker words. Smear test. You actually stand a fair chance of recovery if you smeared while you were writing. For the inks tested, the average dry time was 17 seconds, and the realm of normal was 13 to 21 seconds. KWZ's Grapefruit has an average dry time of 19 seconds, so normal. The last writing sample is done on Franklin Christoph paper. No bleeding, no ghosting. We get no feather, spread, halo sheen. The extra fine did show some shading. You see it in the word brown, you see it in the word over. The extra fine's a lot lighter than the stub, while the medium's the same tone as the stub. The extra fine took 8 seconds to dry, while the medium took 11. Scrubby for both gave us no color variation, and we did get that little bit in the extra fine. Smear test, you could not recover if you smeared while you were writing. Instead of finding inks that look like KWZ's Grapefruit, I'd prefer to find an ink. Instead of finding inks that look like KWZ's Grapefruit, I'd prefer to find an ink that complements its color on the page. I decided to go with a nice blue-black ink by Atramentis, properly named Blue Black. If you'd prefer a different complement color, then down in the description are links to those playlists. So what do I think of KWZ's Grapefruit? Sometimes, rarely, but sometimes I like to match an ink to a pen by its color. And I thought this was a perfect color match. Just curious how many people out there match the colors of the inks to their pens, and you can share that in the comments. This is a decent red. So what nib and pen are going to give the best writing experience with this ink? I prefer the thicker, darker lines without any shading from this ink that you get from a wet medium or wet broad pen. In the next video, we're going to take a look at Atramentis Magenta. It's a scented ink, Dianthus.